talk about China. Woohoo! Yeah, and I'll have it. I'll post. I mean, they're both on YouTube. The videos having to do with China, and you'll be watching those. You have to watch these things. I mean, I'm giving you the notes, but you have to watch these ones on China. It's really interesting as far as history goes, but I think it's also very. I mean, I look at this stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, that helps explain what is going on in China today. You know, rounding up 1 million people and sticking them in concentration camps for re-education purposes. Could you imagine how bad school would be if you got rounded up and stuck in school somewhere? So anyway, good morning, everyone. Just a couple reminders of things coming up here for you. There is the due date, and I've got it written down for Blue Day as Thursday, the 17th of December. So that's in just over 2 weeks' time. If you want to turn it in physically, drive by, have an extra 24 hours you can turn it in on the Friday, right before break. It's a green day, and I know some of you guys, appreciate the extra 24 hours. It's up to you. That's your final draft. Does that make sense? So, printed copy of your IA. Some of you have just a few things that you need to do on your papers. Others, if you have more than a few, you want to take some time to make sure that you get those done right. Because it's not like, oh, you're going to have it again. After I get your final draft, I grade it, right, for your purposes for, this semester. And then I grade it on the IB scale. And I send that off to Ms. Holliday. And she submits those to IB. And then IB comes back and says, okay, I want these ones, and I want these ones, and I want these ones. From the top, from the middle, and from the bottom. Probably for you guys, I'm guessing probably about 10 samples. And so then they look at those ones and they did Mr. Hansen get it right? Right? Did I got it right? So there's no benefit to any of you if I gave a really high score to somebody who didn't deserve a high score. Does that make sense? Because otherwise then that would sink the overall scores of everybody. So I do them accurately. And usually what happens then is IB comes back and they're like, yeah, you had it pretty accurate. So do the best job you can on that. This is, and I've used different analogies at different times. This is like taking, I don't know, for those of you guys in track, this is like having, a 100-yard lead in a cross-country race. Or in volleyball having, I don't know, a 10-point lead in a game or a one game. Exactly, yeah. So, and who knows? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with IB, keeping a close eye on that. But last year, remember what happened with the IAs for history? That was it. That was it. So do a really good job on that one, like the students did last year. And what's that? All but one. Yeah. All but one. One came up, and it was kind of like, dude, dudette, whatever, person, you didn't, I laid it all out there quite clearly for you. You guys are all within the mark, right in here. You guys are all within the mark. You can do it. So, don't wait till the very last minute to make those adjustments and so forth. Yeah. I don't really give you that, but you can sort of extrapolate it a little bit on the point value out of 100. So if you're like in the 90s range, that's good. If you have a really quick question or something that you're tripping over or so forth, I don't get to have the big meeting again. We already had that. But if there's like a really particular question, I may be able to help you on that. Okay? They tell me which ones I have to send in. No. It typically is like the top 2 or 3, the bottom 2 or 3, and then several from the middle. Yeah, so it's like when they clump around, last year's ones, they were all clumped pretty high, which no surprise then the students all passed with, say, one. I think it was like 21 out of 22, which was really, really good. I was really pleased with those guys because they put in the work. And 2 of those that passed were ones that I had to push the paper back to them and say, fix it up before we have our meeting. And I've had a few of those among the current seniors. So yeah, I mean, it's a good sign. It's like, I'm not going to have my meeting with you yet because you need to do more work. I mean, that sucks to hear that, but the payoff is if you do the work and you do a nice paper ultimately, it comes in nice. It works out very well. Okay? Does that make sense? So, for you guys, Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, come in with an e-copy or a printed copy. I want you guys to have an opportunity to have some in-class peer review and editing. You should have proofreaders look at it. You guys are good proofreaders yourself, for spelling and grammar and stuff like that. But you guys are also all trained of what to look for a history IA. So I'm going to give you guys some time in class to have somebody else in here. So there's 6 of you. So, double up, trade. Does that make sense? So that's roughly about a week before the final due date. Because usually we don't have any opportunity in class. Under normal circumstances, we don't, and even more so this time around. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the deal. The test that the unit we're working on right now, Cold War Part 2 of 3, that's your semester final. That's your big test. The unit we're working on right now, that'll be your big test, and we'll have that after the break. And, I'll probably have a conversation, depending on exactly when we finish that, I might have a conversation with you guys as far as like, well, do you want to do it like right now, or do you want to wait until the very end of the semester? Because at that point, then I'll be moving on to Part 3 of 3, those notes. Okay? This test will be, how big is that one going to be? 75 points? This unit? Okay? You guys ready? We're actually getting pretty close to wrapping it up. China's kind of the last big chunk of it. And I don't have lots of slides for you, so you're going to have to just sort of like imagine. And I know, and this is what's great about it, because like the video is good. It's good, it's good, it's good. Here we go. Let's set the scene. It's China. China is at war. China is at war. Ellie, who was China at war with in 1950 and 51? I'll give you a clue. They're helping out North Korea. China is helping North Korea. They're against South Korea, and who's in there helping South Korea? The United States of America and some others, okay? And how are the Chinese doing? Are the Chinese able to push back the United States away from the North Korean-Chinese border, or is it a complete failure? They're able to push us back. Write this down. It is a victory for China to be able to push back the United States away from the Chinese border. Raise your hand if you can tell me, what was the name of the U.S. general that was like, man, I can get this done. I can get it done. Come on, Truman, let me just go in there and wax those communist Chinese. Let's just take them out. And who got taken out? Yeah, this guy got fired by President Truman. Remember his name? Douglas MacArthur? Douglas MacArthur was a U.S. general. He got fired by President Truman. And he was like the hero of World War II and so forth. And he had, done some amazing things. But President Truman was like, let's not attack China directly because they're close with the Soviet Union. This is a nuclear war, and this is not a good idea. So, in China, they fought the United States to a stalemate. So did they win? I don't know. For a country that had just gotten started, communist regime in China had just gotten barely started, they look at that as a victory. Write that down. The communist Chinese look at that as a victory. They're like, we're willing to go toe-to-toe with the United States of America. And in fact, bless you, a big takeaway from that is this thing called mass campaigns. We're going to see this again and again and again. This is where the Chinese Communist government says, all right, everybody, everyone's going to be involved in this mass campaign. We're going to be leading it from the top, but we're going to have people from the Communist Party encouraging this in every local village and every community. You got that? The mass campaign. This particular mass campaign, you can see it in your notes, it was called Resist America and Aid Korea. All right? Now, if you were a soldier, your job was really simple. You follow orders, you take your gun, and you fight against the Americans. And they paid a high price for that. The Chinese casualties were 1.5 million. There were a lot more Chinese dead than the United States had dead or injured as a result of that war. But they pushed us back. What is the average? Raise your hand if you can tell me. I'm trying to remember if I covered this with you guys. What was the average Chinese citizen's expectation of what they could do to help the war effort? What could they do? Well, besides joining the military. Obviously, joining the military is definitely putting your, anything else you can do? You're working. You get paid. You going to keep your whole paycheck? Contribute money. Write that down. Contribute money. And it's one of those things where it's kind of like, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like somebody was watching you as to whether or not you were really contributing? It's kind of like, here's the worst example. You go out with friends and you order some food, and then it's time to pay the bill, and everyone's looking around, and somebody's like, they throw in $1, and you're like, you ate more than $1's worth of food. So there's an expectation that people will contribute. The Chinese Communist government expects you'll do it, and there's a lot of peer community expectation. They're keeping track of this. You got that? Now, when people get involved, sometimes they're fully motivated themselves to do that. And there were a lot of Chinese, fair enough, they were like, yeah, let's fight those Americans and so forth. These are the same people that helped the communists to win power. So they're like, yeah, let's do this. The Americans were supporting the nationalists, and they still support them in Taiwan, so let's do this. So the people did this. This was a very effective thing. All right, the mass campaign, it worked. Raised a lot of money, gave a lot of support to the war effort. Got that? Ready? Here's the next mass campaign. The Chinese Communist government was like, wow, this is really good. We could get people involved in all kinds of stuff. There just doesn't seem to be resistance to this. America's a little harder to do a mass campaign. In World War II, a lot of people buying war bonds and so forth. Bless you. But it's like if people say today, hey everybody, let's beat that pandemic. Everyone, 100% in favor of wearing masks at all times and places in all public. You're like, this is America. We've got a number of things. We care about people's health. We care about people's freedom. We care about not having the government too involved. But we do want the government to be involved in some. We're just like a whole bunch of free agents in this country. And sometimes we do come together for big, big causes. But think about this in China. It's particularly with the Chinese Communist government, it's not the first time this happened in Chinese history. Emperors could count on this as well, but the Chinese Communists are now in charge. When they want something to happen and they tell the people to do it, a lot of people will do it. Some of them will be enthused by it, and some of them will be afraid of being seen to be against it. You understand that? Again, have you ever been in a peer pressure situation where you're like, I'm not going to go against my peers? Well, think about this as being societal peer influence tacked in with political, governmental peer influence. And there's no way out. The next campaign is called Enemies Without Guns. All right, so we got all these different names, and you've got that written down in your handout, so I'm going right along there. Some of you guys I can see you have it in front of you, which is very, very helpful. Enemies Without Guns. Here is another campaign instituted at the top, filtered down through the local communist apparatus. What is the Enemies Without Gun campaign? This is a goal to wipe out the dirt from China, everything from the old society. Oh my gosh. Well, what is from the old society? Actually, older people tend to have a greater attachment to the things that have occurred in the past. So, there actually is, the old people have to be very, very cautious because the young people are the ones that are full of the communist enthusiasm and everything. And da-da-da-da. So, we'll just go ahead and identify these. Religion. That's part of the old society thing, right? Religion. And when I talk about religion, I'm talking about how many of you guys have seen the Eddie Murphy Mulan version, the animated version, right? Really cute, and they're like all into their ancestors, and isn't that right? It's almost like ancestor worship and so forth, ancestor reverence. That's bad. Write that down. That's not okay. Because that goes against the communist theme and so forth. So that religious identification, Buddhists, monks, and so forth, that's all wrong. Forget that. That's part of the old. Oh, capitalism. Let's throw that one in there as well. Capitalism is bad. That's old. Get rid of capitalism. And anybody who is associated with it. Okay? Anybody who is had ties to foreign governments and foreign corporations and missionaries from foreign countries. It's all bad. Well, what if you were a former landowner? Oh, by definition, you were a capitalist. You're going to have your land taken away from you, given up to all the peasants. That happened very, very quickly. So if you're a former landlord, it sucks to be you. And if you're trying to hide out, what does the government do in order to encourage people to identify where the dirt is? Informers. You will have people informing and identifying who needs to be, here's the verb, struggled with. Who needs to be struggled with? Can we talk about struggle meetings? We're going to have a special struggle meeting. Anybody want to volunteer to be the person who they're going to be struggled with? Oh my gosh, you do. Wow, that was fast. That's how it works in China. Boom! We're going to point the finger at you. You are, let's just say you're the daughter of a landlord. Right? Is it your fault that your dad is a landlord? Is it your fault that your family had lots of land? So what are you going to do now? This went really bad when we had somebody volunteer to do this. Because here's what happens as a struggle meeting. Write this down. Thousands of people from the village and the community come for a long meeting with you and maybe some other people who are going to be struggled with. And they get in your face. And they go through all of the bad things that supposedly you have been involved with. And you're like, you could defend yourself and go, I didn't have anything to do with anything. That was my dad. Oh, no, you don't take that tack. When you look at the videos, watch very careful, because you're going to see some images of struggle meetings. And the people who are being struggled with, if they want to survive, if they want to have a hope of survival, they bow their heads like this and remain quiet. And occasionally, if they're asked to say something, it will be like confession-like. Like you'll hear this one guy, I think I told you guys last time, the son of the landlord, he's like, you are right, you've already taken the property, take this, take that, you are right, you were so right. He talked his way out of everything, so he's not going to be killed. You know how many people are killed during that range of struggle meetings during that first mass campaign? Thousands jailed or executed. So if you actually resist, that's not going to work out very well for you. They're going to remove the dirt. And you're like, wow, is that the first time this ever happened? It happens when authoritarian regimes gain power, like in Cuba or in Russia or now here in China. Yeah, it's part of the thing. All potential opposition is crushed. Got it? Got it. Nasty. A little bit about Mao's personal life. Not a lot, just a little bit. Mao, as a person, he can do no wrong. We'll see this. His personality just comes out at you as you watch this. He can do no wrong. Now, he relied upon the work of others in order to win the communist efforts in the Chinese Civil War. But once he's in power, more and more it's kind of like, he's like godlike. There's sort of like a cult around him. And good luck if you try and criticize him as like, I knew you back when you were a young man. He's also got some interesting personal features. It was fascinating. Some of the students used as their source for the History Film Festival a doctor's biography. And you'll hear this guy being interviewed in the film. He's Mao's doctor, and he's with him for quite a bit of time. And he'll talk about like what's Mao's like, this, that, and so forth. And Mao, he says, like, Mao had no sense of time. Mao had no regular meetings. But Mao was completely in charge. And if he wanted to give an order, he would just write it on a piece of paper, and all of a sudden this order would be transpired all across the country. He also moved into the imperial city, the imperial palace complex. You can see it in your notes. It's called Zhongnanhai. Zhongnanhai. In Beijing, when the emperor was in charge, there was like the imperial palace, and it was blocked off from the rest of the city. Well, guess who's going to be living in that part of the city now? Mao and his top communists. So now they're living in that complex there. So they're not as available to the average Chinese citizen. What does Mao like to do for fun? dance parties. He has dance parties. And so they'll bring all these people in, and they'll have dances, and they'll have Russian music, and they'll have whatever. But it's mostly for Mao. He has these dance parties. And who does he dance with? He dances with young women, one after another, after another, after another. Yeah, later when they have dance parties, the doctor comes in later. I think this was like in the early 60s. And then it says he goes and rests for a while. And it's sort of like, what the heck is he doing? When Mao's in charge, okay? What does Mrs. Mao get to say about that? Jiang Xing? Not much. Yeah. Question? Comment? I mean, it's just sort of like, it's just sort of, you know, this is Mao. This is Mao. That's what he does. All right, here we go. In the 1950s, in the early 1950s in particular, the Soviet Union has a very strong influence, and they send over the templates, the blueprints, and encourage China to develop industrial projects. Write that down. This is going to be a big thing for China. It was a big thing for the Soviet Union to industrialize, to build a windmill, to use some animal farm speak, to industrialize. Was China industrialized enough? No, not really. I mean, think of it this way. How did China do against, like, foreign enemies in the late 1900s? They're not industrialized enough. They're not industrialized enough. So they're like the Soviet Union helps them out that way. They're like, hey, we did this. Did it work for the Soviet Union? To a degree. They were able to be industrialized enough in World War II to beat the Germans. So, I mean, that's good. Didn't help their overall economy, you know, prosper as much as they would have liked to. So now we're going to have, write this down, government industrialization. The government is in charge of industrializing, all right? So how do you pay for all of the things you're going to need to build factories and to build dams and to build all of the industrial infrastructure? Well, you're going to need something to pay for it. And here's the thing that is going to pay for it, and they're going to pay heavily. Farming. Got it? Farming. China's farms are supposed to produce enough to feed the people. Yeah, right. And also the excess is going to go to be sold off to pay for these industrial projects. You got that? That's the simple formula. So if the government's in charge of that, what do they need to do with respect to the land? Oh, the land that was taken away from the landlords and given to the peasants. Well, here, let's go ahead and do it. 1953, the socialization of the land begins. Socializing agriculture. Basically, the government's going to start taking it over in various different steps. And here's the first step, okay? All right? So you have, before the communists come to power, landlords. Communists come to power, take the land away from him. Give it to the poor peasants. Now the peasants have the land. So now what's the communist government going to do? It's going to encourage them to join, you ready? Into cooperatives. Write that down. Cooperatives. You guys have heard of like the Boise Co-op and other kinds of cooperatives? Those are voluntary. Those are voluntary cooperatives. Farmers get together and they form a co-op, and then they, you know, sell their various different products and so forth to the marketplace. Well, this cooperative system is pushed upon the peasants by the government to get them to become supposedly more efficient. Okay? And there's a lot of pressure. Some of them are like, I don't want my neighbors to be involved in running my farm because they're not as efficient. They don't work as hard. They're kind of lazy. I just want to do a good job myself. Is that going to be acceptable? Nope. A lot of pressure by the government and the community to form into cooperatives. By the end of 1955, 2/3 of all the peasants had joined in cooperatives. So this is like pressure, pressure, pressure. So at that point, then the government's like, okay, time to move to the next step. You ready for the next step? The next step is called collectivization. Collectivization. And the simple thing to remember under collectivization is there's no private property whatsoever. You see how easy it was? The government says, okay, here you've got your individual private lots. Oh, wait, now you're all collective. Here's just an easy thing to do. Now that you're all working on the thing collectively, or cooperatively, we'll just take the deed. We'll just take over complete control over the land. You got that? So the government is now taking complete control of the land. So who makes the decisions over what is going to happen on the land? The government. And you're going to have 600 million peasants working on collectives after all of these collectives have been put together, and the government is in charge. The government is in charge of what's grown. The government is in charge of how much of the harvest is going to be set aside for human consumption, and how much of the harvest is going to be sold off to help pay for industrialization. Absolutely. This is where we're going. This is where things are going to be going. Because, in fact, write this down, and you'll see it, and you'll hear it in the stories, and some of the stories are just like, they're heartbreaking. The government is going to take too much. And if the government takes too much, is there enough for people to eat? And if there's not enough for people to eat, what are we talking about? Man-made famine. Eventually I'll give you a number, but I suppose I can spoiler alert it to you right now. Eventually, by the time we get to the early 1960s, as a result of various government policies and so forth, and taking too much grain, 30 million people dead from long-standing famine. This is where people look and they're like, who are the worst, terrible people from the 20th century? Well, you can put Hitler up there because he was just he was a killer, but how many Jews did he kill? 6 million. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, millions, single-digit millions. Stalin, how many people did he kill in his megalomania? Double digits, but low double digits, maybe 20-something. Mao, just through his economic, agricultural ignorance, will end up killing about 30 million people in his own country. How did it get to be that? If you got a policy that is not working, would you think somebody would step up and go, dude, that's not working? I mean, have you ever heard the story, the emperor and his new clothes? Have you ever heard that story? It's a great story, right? These guys, these wheeler-dealer salespeople come in to this emperor who's so full of himself, and they sell him the most beautiful garments ever. And they convince the emperor that they're the most beautiful garments ever. Of course, they're completely see-through, and they're not there at all. But everyone's so afraid to tell the emperor that he is now walking around without anything but his underwear on, except for a little kid who obviously hasn't been trained to be afraid of the emperor's opinion, and he says the emperor is walking around in his undershorts. And then all of a sudden the emperor's like, bing, you're right. What does he do to the guys that sold him the stuff? Yeah, I can't remember which version, if you get the tough version, they get killed and ripped apart by a crowd, or they run away and, make it somewhere. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, so that's what they're doing. But the thing is, it's like, here's the key. People are so afraid of getting punished by the emperor, they'll keep their mouths shut rather than get in trouble. And so even if 30 million people are dying of starvation, people aren't going to speak up against it. How did you get to that point? All right, you ready? Let's get to that point. Because it actually didn't start out that way. Write this down, 1956. I have to tell you this part. 1956, a new mass campaign. Okay, it's called Let 100 Flowers Bloom. It's actually a longer thing. It's like Let 100 Flowers Bloom in the arts and something else in the sciences. Basically, this is a free speech campaign. Hear me out here. Because you're thinking, does this happen in totalitarian communist China? Encouraging free speech? Yes, under Mao. See, Mao's at the top, and then the people are all below, and in between you've got the party. And Mao's looking at the party, and he's looking and going, wow, those guys are kind of too set in their ways. They have too much power. They're in charge of too much. And I'm like, who put them in power? You did. But that doesn't stop Mao. He goes over their head, talks to the people, and says, it's time to criticize these people in between. Let's keep them on their... Oh my gosh! Yeah, Mao encourages them. And wait till we get to the 1960s. Mao encourages people to criticize communist officials and teachers and bureaucrats and all those kinds of people. You got that? That's what Let 100 Flowers Bloom is. It's like, hey, we could be better. How many of you guys have benefited from constructive criticism? Yes. How many of you guys have given constructive criticism to somebody and they were like, thank you for that constructive criticism? How many of you, check this one, how many of you have given what you thought was constructive criticism to somebody who was willing to take constructive criticism, but you just got him at the wrong day and the wrong time and it just didn't work out quite so well for you? Yeah, it's kind of like, ooh, let's check this out. What's their mood like? Oh, am I going to say this? Maybe you should anyway. So Mao, notice this. Does Mao want the constructive criticism? No. Who is he sicking the people on to constructively criticize? The party apparatus and, everybody kind of like in that middle layer. So here we go. The party apparatus is getting criticized, right? And some of it's very good. It's like, this program's not working as well, and you can do this. I mean, it's like, whatever. I mean, how many of you have ever given constructive criticism to somebody and they're like, wow, they're awfully sensitive. They didn't seem to like that. Well, write this down. You ready? Communist officials don't like being criticized. They don't like it. They don't like it. They're like, this is getting too bad. Mao, what are you doing? You can't tell Mao that. Well, you can try. And eventually they do. After a period of time, about a year, in 1957, Mao reverses himself. And he listens to the communist leaders around him who do not like being criticized. He listens to them and says, wow, you guys are right. These people shouldn't be criticizing you so much. He changed his mind. Be careful to be in the room when Mao changes his mind, because if you agreed with him yesterday and you don't agree with him today, you're in trouble. The next campaign is called the Anti-Rightist Campaign. You ready? The Anti-Rightist Campaign. You can see where this is going. Mao encourages the Anti-Rightist Campaign. And who's going to be on his side? Who's going to be like leading the cause here? Communist officials, including Deng Xiaoping. You can write down Deng Xiaoping. He's in there. Okay? And these are going to be like, identify out there people who are rightists. I'm like, really? Are there any rightists left in the country? Well, you know who's going to be identified as a rightist? Exactly. All those people who had criticized the communist officials during the Let 100 Flowers Bloom campaign. Yes! I told you. Oh, really? Where does it say that? No, let me spell this out. You ready? This is almost like straight from Stalin. Mao believes that 10% of the population are rightists. It's scientific. If 10% of the population are rightists, then how do you find out who they are? You just go around and look. And if you're a local communist official, who do you suppose is going to be at the top of your list of rightists in your area? Exactly. All those people who criticized you the previous year during the Let 100 Flowers Bloom campaign. He felt that they weren't doing their job well enough, and so it's kind of like, yeah. It's always a dangerous position to be number two in an autocratic system or totalitarian system, because number one is in power, and he looks at number two and goes, you're getting a little bit too close to power. I think I'm going to knock you down a little bit. And who am I going to use to do that? The masses of people below. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And now it's flipping. It happens. You got that? Guess how many people are going to be new wave of struggle meetings. Let's have some more struggle meetings across the entire country. Struggle, struggle, struggle. Identify the rightists. How many people are going to be identified as rightists and packed off to like some communist detention, re-education camp. Like 1 million. Yeah, around 1 million. Yeah, jail, labor camps. So if you're somebody that's sort of thinking, well, Mao said it's okay to criticize, if he changes his mind again, think about your situation. You criticize somebody. You thought it was constructive. They liked it. And the next day, they're like, no, and they slap you. And then they come around and they're like, I'm sorry. I'm open to criticism. What are you going to do? Pavlov knows these things. It's like negative reinforcement. No! I feel like that little, it's like I've got an electrode. Write this down, because as a result of this flip-flopping and so forth, who in China is going to be willing to take a chance to point out what's really going on, if it is in the nature of criticizing a communist government program? You're going to be afraid to. Because what's going to happen if you criticize? You could end up dead or in a re-education camp. Which you might be dead, but at the very, not everyone died in a re-education camp, but they all had their, It's not much fun. It's kind of like today. Are there people in re-education camps in China today? Yes, lots of them. What are they doing? Oh, I don't know. They're making various different products. I don't know. And sometimes they're actually debating in Congress right now whether or not to have a ban on products from China that were made in part, perhaps, by slave labor in communist re-education camps. Yeah. Who's that? Oh, Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, Deng Xiaoping, the guy on the far right. Yeah, Deng Xiaoping. He doesn't like chaos. We'll keep an eye on Deng Xiaoping as we go through. He doesn't like things when they get kind of chaotic. Because we're going to see that he actually almost loses his life later on during a period of chaos. Because you think Mao's is acting pretty all over the place right now? Just wait till we get to the 60s. All right, here we go. Now, ready? 1958. Who was the Russian leader, the Soviet leader? He's been in there for like 5 years since Stalin died in 1953. Starts with a K, rhymes with Khrushchev. Khrushchev, yes. So Khrushchev is the leader in the Soviet Union. Does Mao look up to him as the leader of the original communist country? No, he's like, who are you? I'll listen to Stalin. He's an original, but... And in fact, Khrushchev criticizes China. Ready? Write this down. This happens in August of 1958. Okay? In August of 1958, Mao Zedong sends over artillery shells in two little islands called Quemoy and Matsu. Do you see those in your handout? Quemoy and Matsu. They're small islands just off the coast of China. They had been part of China, but they are officially occupied by, guess who? Taiwan. Yeah, Taiwan. Yeah. Sent artillery shells into them. I think the Taiwanese were doing maybe some military training there, and Mao's like, that should be mine. And so he sends artillery shells. Khrushchev attacks them, yes. But doesn't land forces there, just, fires off some... I think it's close enough to the Chinese shore. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But Khrushchev's like, don't do that. I'm the leader of the communist world here thing, and you could get into a fight with Taiwan. And if you get into a fight with Taiwan, then you get into a fight with the United States of America. And if you get into a fight with the United States of America, then we're going to have to get into a fight with the United States of America, and that could be nuclear war. So Khrushchev is like upbraiding Mao, criticizing him. Do you understand that? Mao doesn't like it. He does not like to be told by world leaders. He might listen to Stalin, but Stalin's gone. Mao is not going to be taking criticism from any other world leader, including communist officials from the Soviet Union. Write it down. They break off relations pretty well by 1960. Right? So Soviets are going to be like, okay, fine, we'll take the blueprints for whatever factories we hadn't made, to help you out and so forth, to move you along. It's not going to work out very well. So there's going to be tension between the Soviets and the Chinese. We've intimated that before, because when you get a president like Richard Nixon, he's going to come along and try and drive the wedge a little bit wider. between those two countries. But you can see part of its personality. Who is the leader of the communist world? If you ask Mao, what's the answer? Mao is, yeah. And you ask Khrushchev? Khrushchev would say, yeah, well, the Soviet Union is. Here's another thing that is internal for China. And it gives them some bad publicity, but they're like, this is part of China, and we're going to deal with it. Yeah, Taiwan is a problem, but you know what? Tibet, write it down. Tibet, the mountainous region of Tibet, which is contained within the boundaries of China. They're thinking, wow, they're a little bit too autonomous, and so they send in the military in 1959. They send in the military. Who's the leader of Tibet? It's a religious leader. It's the Dalai Lama. He ends up escaping to India. Okay? He ends up escaping to India. Next, we are going to be talking about the Great Leap Forward. It starts in 1958. It's a really amazing plan that Mao came up with so that within 15 years, Chinese industry is going to be not only equivalent, but they're going to surpass the industry of the West. And how are they going to do it? Everyone's going to work really, really, really hard and give all of the quote-unquote extra agricultural production to be sold off to help to make all that industrial growth. 30 million people are going to die as a result of the Great Leap Forward. That's what we're going to talk about next time. Yeah, if you want, I'll go ahead and put the link up if you feel like you want to watch the video ahead of time that I'm giving notes on. We're about 2/3 through that first video there. Okay? All right. Excellent.